Welcome. This is just a quick intro to a conversation that I'm about to drop you right in the middle of between Victor Bucklew and myself. And it's broadly kind of weaving in and out of this theme of inquiry itself. And I wanted to give some context because I am just dropping you right in. And it's a different kind of video than I've posted here before, in the sense that it's not just me speaking unto myself like I am right now. And it involves my partner, Victor, my life partner. And I wanted to say a few words about him. And so, what to say about a human who's just fingerprint on life is an embodiment of how impossible it is to label and box anyone into one definition. But some of these facets can paint kind of a picture that may not be represented in the snapshot of this conversation, and not knowing if or when these conversations will appear again here. Just wanting to give some context of the gift that is Victor and his work and his being. And so he is a PhD quantum physicist. I can't tell you anything about that beyond just the title. And that it's spooky and yeah, I won't even try. Aside from that, he is a therapist specializing in trauma work and non-duality. He's an author of a book about non-dual approaches to healing from addiction. And so he's also in recovery, long-term recovery from heroin addiction, which just to sit with that, the fact that he survived that, and also how. And is in long-term recovery from a near-death experience of near drowning at age 17, which catalyzed the awakening process for him. So he's been in post-awakening integration for over 20 years, and long before I even met him. And long before I even knew that I was on this path on my own. And I would also say he is why, not the only reason, but he is inextricable reason of why I'm able to make these videos, why my life looks the way that it looks. And the invisible side of my life, both the awakening facet but also the disability facet, is also invisible for him in how he supports me and how we support each other. But yeah, what a gift. Of course I'm biased, and of course he's human, but in all the best ways, like humility, humor, and work. Like he works. We have to work in this life. And so this work that I'm naming right now, if it's of interest, is going to be listed. Put his link to his book or whatever he prefers below. And just as a snapshot of him, of this moment, of this conversation, and how it became so alive in that moment to speak in this way and capture it. And I hope the audio holds out for you, because it was spontaneous. And so thank you for being here and enjoy.
Just seeing what will come up. And what's coming up here is just the naturalness of that. It just feels like there's no end to like this process of awakening. It's not everything is kind of just emptying out here, just a sense of just like how else could it be? It's kind of like the naturalness of living and being moved by life and like the heart's movement to connect and like dance with others and their kind of journey of like just authenticity and like connection. And it's not like a choice, it just feels like that's where life is kind of, when kind of the structures and the patterns of resistance fall away or are seen as such. There's just this kind of very clear stuff, like kind of feeling of what it kind of living life in this kind of almost like nervous system, fight, flight, you have black, white, get there, figure it out, or heal, or release, or awaken, or whatever that is, and just the natural kind of movement of being.
Being relational.
Being relational, yeah. Just feels like how else could it be?
Yeah.
It's just, it's not really about then like awakening, but more just a movement of authenticity. Which is awakening. That is the movement of awakening.
And I think to a degree, like, and depending on the individual in their life, this kind of shifting can be very chaotic and disorienting and alienating, and there is a utility in having relational support with that, even if I'm not really giving someone anything. This isn't a hierarchy. There's much more awareness now that you don't have to be the ultimate spiritual teacher or guru or special, that all those special terms are also a distraction. But how do we integrate that into a world with relationships and other people?
It feels like kind of like the core, kind of like the root of separation, if you want to kind of put it in those words of resistance, is very much this kind of visceral no of the nervous system. It's this kind of survival instinct. And that kind of that feeling of no feels so bad, and there's often just this like totally unconscious like resistance to that. Our nervous system responds to internal states as it does to threats outside. And so just this kind of very natural, like expected part of just being human, of just this being able to protect and say no, kind of flip into this fight, flight kind of state, polyvagal state, whatever your choice state is. And then out of that kind of secondary resistance, the sense of like being this kind of divided inner, that kind of creates this kind of divided outer kind of moving and trying to find support and safety, and then, oh, maybe awakening, that'll be, and then just, but yeah, that sense of like the relational co-regulation almost, or just being with someone who isn't triggered internally by the sense of like feeling into just that sense of the emptiness at the core, the center of all of us. Not being in control, that not being a problem. And just that kind of, when life starts falling away, that are just the natural tendencies of our nervous system is to clutch, to try to protect. It feels such like something we should be so grateful for, that we can protect ourselves. But just to be able to be with someone else who can hold that space and kind of help our nervous system kind of regulate, just to kind of see that, oh, yeah, this too is okay.
Yeah.
Something kind of comes, something can kind of emerge out of it, like a new pattern can kind of open and emerge from that in a way that when we're alone, there's just
yeah.
And that kind of guru or like teacher, power over type kind of spiritual teaching, I feel like it's kind of evolving here in the West, at least. Kind of more into like mentorship or collaborative spaces. It's really healing and helpful. Just that sense of like being knowing many people here who have been kind of like in that, kind of forever not quite there, for decades, just not quite getting it, or kind of with an ear to the past, this kind of spiritual teacher who looms kind of large in their mind, and then this, maybe being an older teacher today themselves, and kind of teaching from that same sense of distance between, and that kind of just keeps that nervous system in that state of like not safe, not quite there, separate, apart.
Yeah, because it's always, what can they give me? Like, which as soon as they leave, there's an inherent lack in that, and yeah, it feels like also this increasing realization that there's no male-female power dynamic, but they're different sides of the coin of being human that are in all of us, that we don't have to fear our power so much, because that feels like even more than fearing our worthlessness, we fear, maybe not more, but fearing our own power feels misunderstood. Our feminine vulnerability, like as power, our strength, even our bodies, like how powerful our bodies are, that we don't get to be powerful when there's someone in power over us, in the same way that if that hierarchy doesn't exist.
coming up here is the power of listening, the power of like deeply listening, and feels like a transformative power, being listening and to receive that, to be able to really receive being listened to, rather than like as kind of a movement of the feminine in a certain way, rather than the sense of like, I have something to share with you, some insight, some way of looking, and then hear that and then kind of demonstrate that you can do that, or kind of feel it.
Yeah.
But just more of the sense of like being, like what, allowing oneself to really allow whatever's coming up for them to be here, and to have that listened to.
Actively. Just like being unconditionally absorbed, but like in response, active. Like what you share has an impact in a live way.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the pitfall of we sit on a cushion or we're removed from society and we deepen our practice, and then our blind spots to social relation are never tested or in a very safe container, removed. But to really be vulnerable in the world is to face how we impact and actively, if it's not active, it's not vulnerable. And I think that's the other, like, one of the other feminine aspects that's so powerful that we fear is vulnerability. That we're not really awake if we're not vulnerable, because we're not really feeling, we're not really open. But we can be hurt, and the capacity to experience pain in a woman's body, in the same way that a man's body, like, very biologically, like, is built with muscles and power and like strength that's different than a woman's. Like a woman's cycle, a woman's labor for birth, like there's a hardwiring for pain, and that comes with vulnerability, and that feels kind of what we were talking about in the beginning of just the unavoidable power of life is to be mortal, to die, to know that our bodies are going to be ill at certain points and broken at other points and bleed, and just like no amount of spiritual transcendence is going to cure that. That's embedded in our life. But I think it's really interesting to, like, not to erase the masculine forms that are so important and beautiful, but to really like, question how certain aspects have been maybe overemphasized in ways. And I see, it's not like I own them and you don't. Like I see these qualities in you, like your vulnerability, your capacity to listen, your compassion, your connection, relationally. Like these are all like feel feminine. And this is on my mind because we had this conversation, but to realize how that can be in our blind spot, because the conditioning socially has been to overemphasize to the detriment of everyone, not just women. It's like, I don't know, I almost felt like the emphasis needs to be on how we're all suffering when these feminine qualities are repressed. Well, all of us. And when we mistake that for like only one part of our population as the perpetrator and one victim, like, that's a misunderstanding.
Coming up here is just a sense of how social and relational we are, and kind of how we look to, like in the past year, kind of looking to, different non-dual or Buddhist or other teachers as kind of, not even really listening to what they were saying at a certain point, but just how they were kind of relating to other people, or how they're showing up. And just kind of like this sense of like almost feeling kind of like a sense of like something's doesn't quite feel right, and like a sense of feeling almost like this deep kind of aloneness, or this sense of like, just this feeling of like, just like having tried out ways of belonging and kind of being this or that, or doing this or that in the world, and then kind of spirituality, this periods of like going through phases of different awakening, and just, still just a sense of like, mentors or teachers, and just kind of seeing how kind of that relational, like someone sitting up, none of this is wrong, but someone sitting on a stage or podium, and someone comes up and asks questions, and then they leave, and just the nature of the questioners that come up are often, it's just kind of special, kind of be able to kind of come into contact with this very special presence or being or something. And so all of our internal kind of ways of protecting or maybe appearing in a certain way, just all kind of turned up, and so it just kind of creates this sense of like, almost like specialness or mystique around all of this. Whereas having like developed some close friendships with some of these with folks that offer retreats in that way, like there's just a sense of how normal and natural kind of the movement of those people are kind of outside that environment. So just a sense too here of like how much our culture is kind of arranged to almost present and for us to consume, not just spirituality, everything, but spirituality included, and how that impact kind of this very almost special male power over, even if it's not actually really happening, but it's just kind of how it's set up, how that impacts our own process of opening and vulnerability and trusting ourselves.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, there's this curiosity about special, of because we are special. We're all very special. And these kind of scenarios where that, of course we're projecting it outward. It's like the special one. But it's a seeing of what's here. Like there's a permission for that to be felt, although it's pointed in a different direction. Like that's intrinsic to, like, they're not giving it to you, it's within. And so, yeah, the inherent imperfection of talking about any of this or practicing spirituality, it's not to burn it to the ground or like, but that it doesn't end there. Yeah. It's just the beginning.
Yeah, and that's the tendency here, just a sense of like the burning, that quality of wanting to burn down. Like here, there's a period of just tremendous anger towards spirituality and just a sense of being, like, almost being like lied to in a certain way. Mm-hmm. Just this kind of period of time where like all spiritual reflection books and everything just went away. Mm-hmm. I haven't read a book for years, but like just that sense of like all just anger. And I see that in like posts and stuff and kind of communities. Like there's a lot of people that are just very, very critical about other teachers and ways of sharing this. And I feel like it probably, like there's probably some truth in that. Like that it's like it's coming from a place of maybe seeing that like this isn't connected in the way that feels right, or there's some belief there, like this person isn't showing up in the way that I feel like someone should show up. Maybe a projection or just a sense of I'm not being listened to or heard, or like there's this person sitting up there that I feel like, what's so different about them? Why are they special? Why do they have that platform? Just that sense of like there's not that kind of opportunity that really feels very relational for someone else just to affirm. You're beautiful. Like, you know, just like your being, your quirks, your uniqueness, just to really like have someone that to really see you in that way. It's such a gift, and that's like such a like that's often people are turning to spirituality and not just wanting to really be seen, and then the sense of there isn't, where there's like a sense of like, well, I'm no different from that person, and then a sense of like maybe looking inside and seeing there's like some confusion and patterns, like fraud, charlatan, like all these things, but it's just like this, like just the
which might be true, but it also might not. And I think from under the hood, it's like what gets shared, what gets put online, it's like a living moment that's out of context, so we never really know. I think that I would never want to take away someone's own authority of realizing that a teacher didn't speak in a truthful way, or overstepped, or spoke for me in a way that didn't feel right. That happens, and that's not okay to me. But also the cynicism that comes in that really has nothing to do with that teacher. I think it's also what you're pointing to, like just missing that relational component. And I would extend that beyond just spirituality, just like the humanness of we can't survive this life alone. Like we just can't. Of course we're non-dual, of course we're transcendent and in unity, but we're in a body that needs to eat to live another day, and we depend on each other. Doesn't mean we have to, doesn't mean any one thing, but just that hunger, that cynicism, I think can be pointing in that direction, or in some deficiency.
that in myself here, just this deep, kind of deep pain to express oneself, to be seen in the world, and just as the natural kind of flower that we, our gifts, to allow our gifts to be received in the world, and to have that be something that's valued, and for each of us to feel that we belong here.
Yeah.
We have a place here.
Yeah.
We don't have to contort ourselves or create ourselves into these kind of unnatural forms in order to survive another day. And, cynicism. Some people go to depression, some people go to cynicism, anger, resistance, addiction. I mean, just that kind of the role, that kind of relational space of just permission to be seen, received, loved. And then the trauma of also knowing this one of opening in that way to someone in a position of spiritual authority, with that promise of being kind of received and seen in that kind of that deeper sense, and having that be a very painful experience if the other person isn't able to hold that, or if they have their own blind spots or wounds, and just
agenda.
Right. Not necessarily in like a trying to
Malicious.
manipulate or be malicious, but just like, this kind of being in that seat for another person is really, it's not just a kind of a spiritual insight type thing, but really a very like relational, human, like just really being able to be, like it's not just kind of the capacity to be there for someone in that way. It doesn't just happen because someone has had a moment of insight or a very deep awakening. It's very much like a human development.
Yeah, I mean that feels like the getting off of the cushion part.
Yeah.
Of like being in the messiness of life and relating with people who are caught up in their reactivity and conditioning, suffering, and to also not feel that sense of like inferiority or superiority. Of just like, what is this person triggering in me, or do I have the capacity to feel my own truth?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that someone else is suffering, or patterns are getting caught up in something, like that too is okay. That too is so understood. That too, it's not being held onto from this kind of spiritual vantage point. Like, got it, and share this with someone else. But it's just a scene of like, of course it's like this.
Yeah.
How else could it be?
Yeah, because suffering leads to awakening.
Yeah.
And isn't that a gift?
Yeah.
It's so, like, we can never understand the complexity of it.
And we can never, as you were saying, really, it sounds so unnatural to even say, but we can never do that for someone else, or like there's no one. And so there's just that seeing too of like the role here, if there's holding space for someone in that way, is like one of so much humility and so much honor and so much sense of like, I don't know. And just that kind of listening, looking, wondering, kind of loving together, just kind of feeling like, oh, what's going on here? Yeah, there's not a sense of like needing it to be different or something, or like internally kind of gauging, well, it's not quite, or something. It's not quite.
Yeah, because I think it's some sort of a bypass. It's like, well, they need to be like me, they need to be free like me, and then that transcends our own like unconditional humanity.
And there isn't freedom in that.
Yeah,
if someone needs to be
like doing the work for it. I could ever do the work for someone else, or ever want to, or ever want to really take their suffering away. I mean, of course, there's compassion and a feeling with, and like a grief that humans suffer. Like I would never wish my suffering on anyone else, and then at the same time, like the contradiction is it's the most valuable part of my life, and so I think that's another thing that we're just afraid of, seeing ourselves in